Hello, BookTube. Recently, Kevin Toll over at Kevin Toll Reads did another one of his Let Me Know videos where he just puts a subject on the table, a book-related subject on the table, and asks around about it. Tries to figure it out, hashes it out for himself on camera, and asks you for your responses. And I think a lot of them have been wonderful. I'm in fact behind on them. But he did one just recently that I wanted to address just briefly now because it's such an interesting subject, and that is the subject of the perfect book. What makes the perfect book? Is there, of course, such a thing as the perfect book? And if so, what makes it? Uh, it's it was fascinating to watch his video. We are similar, I think, in our just inherent enthusiasm for the whole phenomenon of BookTube, and we're different in other ways. Of course, he's much older than I am, and also he lives in a world completely devoid of nonfiction. So when he's talking about the perfect book, he's immediately talking about characters, setting, dialogue, that sort of thing, as though all of nonfiction, from Herodotus all the way to the present day, simply never existed. So those are differences that I had to keep in mind because, of course, my mind immediately went to works of nonfiction, which are far more likely, I think, to approach an objective kind of perfection than any work of fiction. If you want to study uh, the Battle of Midway, if you want to write a book on the Battle of Midway, uh, you can see in your mind the way to make a perfect book. Of course, the intangibles will need to be there. You will still need to draw good characters. You will still need to write a fast-paced, good story. You will still need to entertain your readers without insulting their intelligence. That your narrative tricks will still need to be there. But the other parts of perfection are clearer in nonfiction, I think, because if you want to write a perfect account of the Battle of Midway, you'll go into it without any preoccupations. You won't have any axes to grind. You will not miss any sources. So you will do oral histories of everybody who was there. You will take your own oral histories of anyone who's still alive, but you will also read all the Japanese sources. And also ideally, all of the Japanese analysis of the battle, written by later scholars, to say nothing of all of the analyses of the battle written by American scholars. Uh, you'll do a thorough analysis of the data of where vessels were at what time. You will essentially recreate every second of the battle and then write it up. And, well, we're not adding any new participants in the Battle of Midway. There are no more oral histories. There's only a certain number of them. We know how many people participated in it. So it is possible on the factual side, on that objectively measurable side, for you to write a perfect book about the Battle of Midway. And then it will rely on intangibles. But let's say that you're, a Samuel Eliot Morison and you do the intangibles really, really well. Well, then it's certainly possible. I just recently read an ebook, a short thing. It was like 80 pages about the Battle of Tinian. And the author did a very good job. But even I know that there were vantage points and sources that he was not consulting. And I don't know if that was because he didn't know they exist or because they were beyond his reach. Maybe they were expensive for him to acquire, or maybe they were behind a language barrier. All I know is that the account that Samuel Eliot Morison wrote almost 100 years ago of the Battle of Tinian is much better than that standalone little booklet on the battle alone. So it's elusive, but you need those elements to be in place. Whereas in Kevin Toll's Road, which has no nonfiction in it of any kind, I'm hoping that he considers participating in Nonfiction November because he really needs it. But in his world, he was wondering. There's only one book he mentions in his video. There's only one book he's ever given 5 stars to, a perfect read. And that made me automatically think what I think when I think a book is brilliant. It wouldn't be a 5-star read for me. I don't star rate my books. They aren't tomatoes or carburetors. I discuss books for a living, so of course I'm not going to give stars to books. But I very seldom just load a book with superlatives without anything else, and that made me think immediately as to why. And the why is obvious. I read critically. Not everybody does. And that's perfectly okay. If you decide that you don't want to read critically, that you'd rather just be swept away, rather read with, as I used to put it, your lymph nodes, go right ahead. There's no wrong way to read. So if you're enjoying that, that's just fine. I don't do that, and I can't anymore, except for the books that I have reread a million times where I am not even, it's not even reading anymore. But anything else, I read critically. Meaning, I am definitely open to it moving me. I'm definitely open to it raising the hairs on the small of my neck. But I'm also assessing it as though I were going to review it. That's a habit that I fell into a long, long, long time ago. I'm not going to get out of it, and I wouldn't want to. I love it. I absolutely love the feeling of reading critically. Uh, and that's why I almost never rate a book as perfect. Because no matter how much I like it, no matter how much I esteem it, I always see flaws. And I started to wonder when I watched Kevin Toll's video, would that be true just across the board? Would I be able to find flaws, in other words, with maybe some of my favorite books? So I looked at three of them with this discussion prompt in mind, and I urge you to do the same. I would love to see another video on this subject, or more than one. I looked at The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope. I stuck to fiction since we're in Kevin Toll's world. And in his world, no one has ever written any nonfiction. So I stuck to fiction. I went to The Prime Minister by Anthony Trollope, which is one of my favorite Anthony Trollope. It's probably my second favorite Anthony Trollope novel. And I thought about it. I rank it really high. I think it's an excellent, excellent Victorian political novel. I would say fairly handily the best Victorian political novel of them all. And then I thought about it in terms of, is it perfect? And thought, no, right away, it's not. No, it's not. I love it, and I could defend a lot of Trollope's choices in that book, but it's not perfect. No. I don't think, for instance, that in The Prime Minister, odd as it is to say, I think that one of the characters in the book that Trollope is least comfortable with is the Prime Minister, is Plantagenet Palliser. Plantagenet Palliser never really feels human in the book. Maybe a couple of scenes with his son, but otherwise, no. And also, the parliamentary bits, I know these are the parliamentary novels, so this feels a little weird to say, but the parliamentary bits, well, they do go on. Some of those scenes do go on. They are what a later generation would refer to as insider baseball. And they are a drug on the market. They're an impediment to the momentum of the novel. There are even a couple of scenes in The Prime Minister, as there are in almost any long Trollope novel, where you sense that he's writing to make the volume. These things were done in serialized installments, and your editor knew how long he wanted the installment to be. And maybe you didn't have that much to say. Well, then you'll pump air into that little thing you're going to do. You're not going to move the story ahead. If you're Trollope, you know what the next chapter is. You're not going to suddenly move to that in this chapter and rewrite everything. No, you're not going to rearrange the schedule. So instead, you'll pump air into the chapter that you're writing, and you can catch Trollope doing that. Where there'll be whole passages that really don't say anything at all. And that happens in The Prime Minister. So no, The Prime Minister is not a perfect book. Even though I love it, it's not perfect. What if we go further back in time and set our sights a little higher? What if we go to the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer? Well, you can see right away that it's not perfect because it's not finished. It was supposed to be this massive, mammoth thing. It would have been twice as long as Montaigne's essays. All the Pilgrims are supposed to tell multiple stories, and they don't. So it's less than perfect there anyway, but you really can't hold that against the book because time and tide wait for no man. Chaucer, he didn't, but he might be the reason that he didn't finish is because he died. He didn't. That wasn't the reason, but still, you really can't hold that against it. But even if you leave that out, it's still not perfect. It's vile in some places, and I don't mean crude. The crude stuff, the crude tales in the Canterbury Tales are often very funny. I'm talking about vile stuff. Savage violence connected with the Christianity of the day, anti-Semitism connected with the Christianity of the day. Those are drawbacks. Those are drawbacks that Chaucer could have known better. His best friend knew better. It wasn't. And there's no use saying he was partaking of the bigotries of his time. Plenty of people at the time. He could have been more elevated than to include as much of that stuff as he did. He clearly liked it. So those are flaws. But you might say, well, okay, but reverting to your first flaw, it's not a finished work. So how do you know he wouldn't have taken those out in the finished work? How do you know he wouldn't have taken out all the flaws in the finished work? Okay. Well, if we're going to do that and we're on the quest for a finished book, we don't need to go any further than this author. We can stick to Troilus and Cressida, which is a finished work. Troilus and Cressida is Chaucer's great finished work, has been ranked by many critics as one of the greatest works in the English language. Not as well known nearly as the Canterbury Tales because it's not nearly as entertaining, although there are scenes in it that are every bit as good, every bit as entertaining as anything in the Canterbury Tales. But Canterbury Tales is taught in high school. You'll walk a long way on a dirty street before you get to someone who's read Troilus and Cressida. A long way before that happens, much less someone who's read it and enjoyed it. But it is a finished work, and it was hailed and has been ever since. But it has flaws, not just the ones I talked about. The kind of an undertone of the thug that really, it's not attractive, and it's clearly Chaucer writing in his own voice, in his own mind. But it's not just that. It's also that technically, as a performance, it's not perfect. It lags and jolts and is a little bit maladroit in its conclusion. So no perfect book either, even with Chaucer. God's own plenty, even with Chaucer. But what if we were to go back even further to an even more elevated work? Not just a more elevated work, but my single favorite book of them all, The Metamorphoses by the Roman poet Ovid. What if we go back to that? Well, here, unlike with Trollope and also unlike with Chaucer, here we have to jump a language. Because it absolutely is not fair to run a perfect book test on a translated work by looking at the translations. That's absolutely not fair. The author doesn't know those translations. They had no say in them at all. So if we go back to Ovid himself, to the Metamorphoses himself, my favorite book, I love it dearly. It is endless. It is also endlessly brilliant. But, nope. Even there, nope. Ovid had an amazing facility for playing with the Latin language. Amazing. Equal to, maybe superior to Cicero. And he indulges in it at length in enormously inventive ways all throughout the Metamorphoses. Sometimes too much. Plain and simple. I'm not talking about the 2 times that I know of where he drops the narrative ball, where his own narrative confusion actually succeeds in confusing him. I'm talking about just in general. Some scenes are a little too clever for their own boots. And that's what you feel when you're reading them. Oh, okay, you're doing that. Okay, I was caught up in the story, and I was caught up in your inventiveness, but okay, you're doing that. So you're not just playing a trombone solo that's better than anyone in the room can do. You hopped up on a table to tap dance while you did it, and that's overkill. That's stylistic overkill. It might show you as the world's greatest genius, but it's stylistic overkill. Yeah, that happens at a few places in the Metamorphoses. So it also is not perfect. So this little mental exercise that I did for Kevin Toll's video just reconfirms in my mind what should be my attitude if I am a professional book critic, which is that there's no such thing as a perfect book. I had an old friend once, years and years ago, we had this conversation, I'm pretty sure before Kevin Toll was born. And my old friend and I were talking about this very subject, whether or not a perfect book exists. And we were both jobbing book critics at the time. Will so-and-so at the Clarion Beacon take a piece? I hear she pays $25, but I hear she's prompt about it. That sort of thing. Those old days. And my friend used to tell the joke as a critic that if I ever did think that an author had written a perfect book, I would take the bus to his house and kill him because I need a job. But not needing to go that far, and I suspect that Trollope and Chaucer and Ovid are all dead. I don't think that a perfect book exists. And I don't think that's just me covering my own professional tiny. I don't think a perfect book exists. I think once you start to read books critically, you can find flaws in any of them. And the thing that strikes you as perfect, the thing that will make you say, close the book and go, oh, that was perfect, is personal. And I like that. I would after a rain barrel of wine with a bunch of calzones here at Hyde Cottage, I would gladly call Ovid's Metamorphoses a perfect book. But I don't mean it critically at all. And I wonder if you do. You know, because these questions that Kevin raises are worth talking about. I wonder if, in your mind, you think there are any perfect books. I've leaving out here. I know that I'm not going to have this problem with my own viewers, but leaving out here any claims to supernatural perfection in the Bible or any other holy book. Leaving that, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a book as a book, a construction of a human being. Do you know any books that you consider to be flawless, where you literally can't find a flaw? I had a friend once who said that that was true of novel after novel by Barbara Pym. I would love to hear it if that's true. Is there such a thing as a perfect book? I'll leave a link to Kevin Toll Reads so that you can watch his video. But anyway, those are my ruminations on the subject. I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.